I think it's time. It's my timer says 5:31. So we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome, everyone. My name is Wendy Root Askew, and I'm our District 4 County Supervisor. The board assigned Supervisor Glenn Church and I to an ad hoc committee to do some additional research and exploration about 11 AB Sheriff Oversight and 11 specifically to AB 1185. So we had a public hearing. We've had a couple sort of internal meetings where we've sort of asked our own questions and tried to do our own research. And then we had a public meeting earlier this year where we solicited more feedback and questions and guidance from the community. So this is our second public meeting where we're sharing more information with you, things that we've sort of been able to pull together so that we understand. We are on Zoom. If you're on Zoom with us tonight, thank you for joining us. You should be able to raise your hand to ask any questions that you need. If you're here with us in the audience, we'll also have that same opportunity for public feedback and comment for us. Let's see here. Do we have any other introductory statements?
I don't, yeah.
Yep. Okay.
Need to.
Perfect. Yeah. So I think the things that we were hoping to talk about and share, I think, so just as in broad context, the Board of Supervisors has a number of responsibilities in the county. And most of those responsibilities are articulated very specifically by a state requirement, by state mandate. And there are very specific duties that fall within the Board of Supervisors. There are also very specific duties that fall within other independently elected officials, such as the district attorney, the district attorney, the assessor, the county clerk, or as well as the sheriff. And so one of the things that we struggled with as a board last year was how do we make sure that we're fulfilling our duty as a Board of Supervisors to provide what limited accountability and responsibility that we're supposed to oversee of the sheriff's office. And so as we've looked at studying this issue, for me, it's really been about trying to understand exactly what are those definition of duties. What are the tools that are available for boards of supervisors to provide appropriate oversight? What is appropriate oversight? What oversight systems are already in place. And we've been collecting this information. And so tonight, I'm hoping that what we can do is share some of the information that we've collected back out with the public and solicit your additional thoughts and feedback so that ultimately Supervisor Church and I can sit down and think about how we can bring this information back to our colleagues on the Board of Supervisors, potentially with some recommendations about how to best move forward, or at least what our options for moving forward might be. So tonight we're hoping to just sort of, again, do a quick review of what is AB 1185, review and background. So there'll be a little bit of the same information that's been shared before. We're going to share some information, additional information that we've collected about the police officer's Bill of Rights, which was a topic that came up at our last meeting. We're going to ask County Counsel to share some broad general overview about the Hernandez litigation, which is a topic that sort of we've been touching on and off as we've had this conversation. But I think it's important that we all make sure we're understanding what that is and how that fits into this conversation. And then finally, we have some results from the survey that we posted following the last meeting, just collecting some general feedback from the community about sheriff oversight. And so we will get that information shared as well. So I think I really appreciate the public's interest in this issue and this topic. And I also want to say I really appreciate the way that the public has helped has been able to understand some of the nuances. This is clearly not it's not a simple, you do this or do that. The options that are available to county boards of supervisors are limited. The authority that's vested in a sheriff is, through state constitution. So as we try to understand what options are available to us, I think the feedback that I've heard from the public is very attuned to understanding that there is no clear. We're all navigating this together, and we're all learning how we might best move forward together. So I just want to say thank you to those who have taken the time to communicate with the Board of Supervisors in more detailed comments, as well as those who responded during the survey. So with that, I think we'll pass it over to, I want to do quick introductions. My name's Wendy Root Askew, District 4 County Supervisor, Glenn Church, District 2 County Supervisor. We have County Counsel Susan Blitch with us here tonight. We have, let's see here, Chief Deputy Eddie Anderson here with us tonight. I see the Sheriff Tina Nieto is online with us tonight. We also have our Communications Director, Nick Pasculi, here with us tonight. And we have a Senior Secretary from our CAAO's office, Alyssa Charavan. Did I get that right, Alyssa? Yeah, great. Alyssa Charavan with us here tonight. So thank you to county staff who've worked hard to get this on the schedule and make this happen. So with that, I'll pass it over to Susan.
I think Nick Pasculi was going to go first with the survey results, but I heard you wanted a kind of brief overview of AB 1185 again. And so just a reminder to everybody, 1185 is a mechanism to provide some sheriff oversight. It envisions either an inspector general, an oversight committee, or both. And what makes AB 1185 different from some of the other police advisory committees that you might know of, it allows for subpoena powers for the group to actually subpoena documents related to investigations that they may take or undertake. So that's it in a nutshell. And then I'll pass it over to Nick.
Good evening, supervisors. Just give me a moment to share my screen.
And Nick, if I can jump in real quick, I just want to read from the section of the government code. So for me, the part that I'm really looking at this and why we're here and why I wanted to look into this issue is, so the county may create a sheriff oversight board, either by action of the Board of Supervisors or through a vote of county residents, comprised of civilians, to assist the Board of Supervisors with its duties pursuant to Section 25303 that relate to the sheriff. So for me to understand when we're talking about 1185 and the legal portions of this, it really is, I'm looking at how we can use 1185 to assist us in our duties pursuant to state mandate for appropriate oversight. And I know there's many other reasons that we've heard that the community is interested in this, but I wanted to just make that very clear that that's where I'm looking at this, the perspective I'm looking at this from.
Okay, with that, I'll get into the survey results. Hopefully everybody online can hear me okay. My name is Nick Pasculi. I'm the County Communications Director and Chief Public Information Officer for the County of Monterey. The survey period ran from July 26th through August 15th of 2023. We used a wide range of medium to get the word out throughout the community. We used, not advancing. We use social media. We use the news media by putting out multiple news media advisories. We also used email blasts to reach the folks that are on our email database, as well as reaching out to approximately 230 community-based organizations, asking them to share the survey with their constituents. In addition to that, we had it featured on the front page of our website with a quick link on our county website to take people directly to the survey. So the survey design was followed all the standard practices and best practices for doing a survey, which included the design of the survey itself, designing the questions. The questions were developed by the County Communications Bureau in cooperation with the County Administrative Officer, as well as the County Counsel's Office. And then it was reviewed and approved before the survey instrument was complete. Our target population was residents and stakeholders in Monterey County. And also, the next step was the survey collection. So we did data collection, analysis, and reporting. The survey consisted of 9 total questions, 3 of which were demographic, 5 of which were qualitative, and 1 was an open-ended question in an effort to dig deeper into the thoughts of the people that were responding to the survey. And as I mentioned earlier, the survey launched on July 26th and ran through August 15th. The survey volume looked like this over the course of that time period. It was interesting that we actually put the survey volume results side by side with our distribution of reminders to the community, and we always saw a spike in the survey responses during those reminders, which is a good thing. And so this is how it looked, and it did definitely tail off towards the end of the survey period, despite our efforts of saying kind of last chance, folks, please, we want to hear from you. So it did seem to taper off around the 11th of August. So I'm going to go into the questions now. And obviously, as I mentioned, there was 3 questions that were specifically with regard to demographics. And as you can see from the survey results, that approximately 49, a little bit over 49% were male. 46% were female, and about 5%, almost 5%, chose not to state gender. Age, I feel this is a very good representation of an age criteria for the number of respondents we had. We had representatives from every age group, including we had one, I think, or 1 or 2 under 18. But this is a fairly even distribution in the age, the question of age. 2 people did skip this question, so there's 304 people responded to question number 2. And question number 3 dealt with zip code. What's interesting to note here is that we did not get 100% response. So in other words, the 306 people who responded to this question did not provide a zip code. However, those that did, we did analyze where those zip codes were. There was one anomaly, which is highlighted in yellow. And my opinion would be that that was a typo, meant to be 95004. And someone typed in 2 instead of 9. So that's just an assumption on my part, but this is how the breakdown did. The numbers of people that responded to the survey by zip code are in red next to the individual zip codes. Okay, so question number 4, and get into the question of trust. And the question was, how much do you trust the current sheriff's office? And so, you know, the responses, 306 people did answer this question. And as you can see from the survey responses, their majority of the folks either were somewhat trusting or completely trusting of the current sheriff's office. And then, of course, there was fewer people that were neutral, somewhat, or there was less than 10% that completely distrusted, and there was 1% that wasn't sure about the question. Now, what you'll notice as we go through here is I did show you the graphs, but I also gave you the analytic data in here as to the question criteria, answer, and the responses. So as you can see, how the numbers stacked up. So that was question number 4. Question number 5 dealt with if the community believed there needed to be or should be an independent oversight board or inspector general to monitor the sheriff's department. Approximately 40 or 38% said yes. Over 50% said no. Slightly less than 10% said maybe, and there was a 3 or 4% that said not sure. So you could argue that there was no compelling call for it in this question, but of course there's still enough folks that obviously said yes that needs to be taken into account. And again, breaking down the numbers, here are the numbers as opposed to being in graph form. Question number 5, or 6, excuse me. In your opinion, how important is it to have an additional county oversight board or inspector general for the sheriff's department in addition to the already existing oversight bodies? That was obviously at the last ad hoc meeting. We talked about that with the community. We did get 306 people that responded to this. And so roughly almost 30% said very important. Slightly less than 10% said somewhat important. Slightly less than 10% said neutral. Not very important was almost 20%. And then not important at all was in the low 30 percentile. So again, going over to the breakdown, you can see how the numbers actually stacked up by the respondents, totaling 306 respondents to this particular question. Question number 7, in your opinion, is there enough oversight of the sheriff's office given federal, state, and oversight that is currently in place? We received over 50% people that said yes. Right about 30% said no. And again, less than 10% said maybe, and less than 10% were not sure. So it's clear that the 10% of the respondents were not either aware of or not sure of the additional oversight that's in existence. Again, by the numbers, you can see the yeses, the nos, and the maybes. And again, all 306 people who responded to the survey did respond to this question as well. Question number 8 had to deal with the fiscal resources necessary, and would you be comfortable with reducing county financial resources allocated to the patrol unit or other public programs to fund establishment and operation of an oversight committee or inspector general? About 15% said yes. Well over 70% said no, and just under 10% said not sure. And then, of course, again, breaking it down by the numbers, you can see that the majority of folks were not comfortable with that scenario. Finally, question number 9 was an open-ended question, as you recall from my introductory remarks. And the idea of question number 9 was to measure some sentiment in allowing folks to express their ideas and their thoughts in a more free form. And those were divided into categories. So again, the question 9, just so you can see it, was what do you think the Oversight Board or Inspector General should focus on, assuming it was implemented in the County of Monterey? So again, a very open-ended question. So we reviewed and read every single question. Only 206 of the 306 people that responded to the survey actually answered this question. And they were divided into categories. And I'm going to share with you now those categories, and just bear with me because there was a lot of comments that had to be compiled. So question number 9. So the category number 1 was additional oversight, unnecessary, not needed, or give new sheriff a chance, was the sentiment category. And 34 respondents were pertaining to that sentiment. The second sentiment was about process improvement, training, TQM, meaning total quality management, was brought up in one response. And then investment in equipment, 29 respondents of the 206 respondents expressed this sentiment. Funding accountability, expense control, and salary review was another sentiment. About 19 people had responses with that sentiment in mind and top of mind. Prioritizing neighborhood safety, more officers on the beat, as well as enforcing laws that already are in place. 46 respondents expressed that sentiment. Oversight needed in the jail, or needed jail performance, or concerns with lawsuits or key performance indicators. That's what KPI stands for. 13 people responded with sentiment in that regard. And then greater transparency, accountability, and more communication out of the sheriff's office. 21 folks responded with that sentiment and made comments to that, to those points. And then customer service concerns, treatment of civilians, behavior of deputies, and administrative conduct. 20 people expressed comments with those sentiment concerns. Unrelated topics to the oversight. There were 13 of the 206 comments that were made comments regarding overall county operations and that were not specific to the Sheriff's Department operation. And then there were 10 responses that were completely off the topic of the sheriff's office entirely. So that didn't even mention have any reference to law enforcement or to the Monterey County Sheriff's Office. And be happy to try to answer any questions you may have, supervisors.
So when I saw this survey, I had a couple of questions that came to mind. As you know, the one question up here is whether or not an oversight is necessary, and the break was 51 to 36. No. I was I was interested to see what kind of breakdown there was between, as much as we could, between incorporated and unincorporated areas, because obviously the sheriff's department has a different role and a more larger presence in unincorporated areas. Some of these zip codes that we looked at are clearly unincorporated, like 95076. And others, like 93907, covers mainly Ferndale, but also spills a little bit into Salinas, but it's primarily Ferndale. So as we tried to sort these through and clearly define onto these, what it's not in here, but because it's quite as statistically firm as the survey we have, but I still think it's noticeable, is that those unincorporated areas actually were in favor of an oversight board by about a 50 to 35, while it was in the cities where it was really more of a, I can't remember the exact number, but I think it was about 2 to 1 against. So that's just a general trend it appeared to be into there. Although there was pretty universal agreement on a few questions that were touched upon in here that did not depend on geography. And one of them was whether to expend additional county resources, which was pretty strongly that on both sides on that question. The other one was, should want to point out is, let me see, I'm in the wrong. Oh, here we are, get my right question. One other question was there enough oversight currently? And again, that one kind of broke along the same lines. So I just wanted to kind of add that in, as I felt it was, from what we were able to parse from it, a relative statistic.
We got all the detail, and I know your team spent a ton of time like going through every line item of all 300 responses to figure out the breakdown of unincorporated. I think it's
I'm going to say it wasn't just my team; it was my policy analyst Vanessa in the background, who's really good at digging in and getting details on things. So thank you, Vanessa.
Just a couple of quick questions. I'm watching the comments that are popping up online. We will have time for public comment, but are we able to take the PowerPoints that have been shared and post them in the chat for anyone, and then make sure that they're available for anyone who would like to be able to see it? Okay, great.
Certainly.
Yeah, no, thank you. And I think one of the things when we wanted to collect feedback, and we also, in addition to the survey, received quite a few written comments that came in the form of email directly to the Board of Supervisors, so with a lot more detail and a lot more nuance and a lot of more specifics than what was included in the survey. So as much as I think the survey is a really helpful sort of touch point for us as we take information in, I also am well aware that, it wasn't with 300 residents responding in a county of 450,000. That's not necessarily a scientific sample for many reasons. And as we're looking at studying this issue, and, I've got, piles and piles of documents and data that we've been trying to understand, and having sat on the Board of Supervisors and understanding what our duties are and some of the things that we've struggled with since I've been on this board in terms of being able to ask questions of the sheriff or get information from the sheriff, I know that those issues that I'm trying to figure out weren't necessarily reflected in what the survey responses came back with. So I want to say thank you to our team for, making this available. I think it's information that's good to have. The one thing that really jumped out to me that I was pleased with, and again, I don't know how scientific it is, but it appears that there's some trust in the sheriff's office, and I just want to recognize the new sheriff, Tina Nieto, and the team that she's building, and the work that they're trying to do to rebuild some of that trust back from the community. So I think this was a good, if anything, it was a good touch point that there is some trust out there in the community. Do we want to take all of our feedback at once? Do we want to just roll through everything that we wanted to share, and then we can collect information? If there's any questions specific to the survey, we can ask them, but I think maybe we could get through everything and then.
I think that might be better.
Okay,
yeah.
So let's do that. So hold your questions. We'll get it all in there. We want to make sure we have time to review everything. So I think next we're going to roll over to the Hernandez litigation or Peace Officer Bill of Rights. What do you want to do next? What would you like to share next?
Peace Officer Bill of
Okay.
Rights will be quicker.
Okay,
And
let's do
then
that
we
one.
can-
Let's review that.
Let me share my screen.
And I'll just share again, one of the things we heard from the sheriff at our last meeting was among the many challenges with a sheriff oversight board and some of the expectations that we were hearing and that I'm hearing both in our public meeting as well as in private conversations is what the public wants to be able to do with the sheriff oversight board. And the sheriff was letting us know that some of those things, there are reasons why we can't do those things. And this was something that kept coming up. So I wanted to make sure we got some more information about police officers' Bill of Rights, what that means and how that ties into what community expectations and our expectations might be about what an AB 1185 sheriff oversight body could do or not do.
Okay, thank you. By way of introduction, I'm Susan Flitch, Chief Assistant County Counsel. And I'm going to talk at a high level about the Peace Officer Bill of Rights. I'm not going to I may bore everyone, but I'm going to try not to go into too much detail. But generally speaking, let's see if I can do this. The Peace Officer Bill of Rights was enacted in 1976, so been around a long time. And the purpose was to provide basic rights and protections to peace officers employed by public entities. So basically, any of your police officers, your sheriff deputies, are covered by the Peace Officer Bill of Rights, which is also referred to as POBAR. The first protection is that there's a 1-year statute of limitations, and that means there's 1 year to act on peace officer misconduct. You can only bring a disciplinary action within a year of either knowing about an unlawful or inappropriate act, or 1 year when you should have known about the inappropriate act. And the example I give is if a sergeant sees a peace officer punching someone, then he should have known about it. He can't pretend not to know about it and say the statute of limitations doesn't run until there's an actual complaint. There are lots of investigation requirements. The employer has to inform a peace officer of the nature of an investigation before that peace officer may be interrogated or interviewed. There's limits on what and how evidence can be collected. It has to be in a peace officer's presence. After a valid search warrant with prior notice, you generally can't get financial information. And this would hold true with cell phones as well. And I put that in there because it's not so much the storage space we're talking about anymore. It's what's on somebody's cell phone. So I skipped, there's a right to representation. Anytime a peace officer is accused of wrongdoing, he has a right to have representation, usually by an attorney, but it can also be by a union representative. There's a right to also appeal discipline. And then perhaps this is more to the point of what I think people are curious about. There's a built-in confidentiality of peace officer personnel files. And that means any kind of personal data, any kind of medical history, but also complaints or investigations of complaints. And then a general catch-all, any information which if released would constitute an unwarranted invasion of privacy. That being said, there are quite a few exceptions to the confidentiality of personnel files. And I'm just going to go kind of read through the exceptions. Any incident involving a discharge of firearm, any kind of officer involved shooting, any incident resulting in death or great bodily injury, any sustained findings of unreasonable excessive force. Sustained findings means that an internal investigation would be conducted and the law enforcement agency would find that there is excessive or unreasonable force. Any sustained finding that an officer failed to intervene when another officer was using excessive or unreasonable force. Any kind of records related to sexual assault, dishonesty regarding reporting a crime or related to investigation of a fellow peace officer, any record related to sustained findings that an officer engaged in discriminatory conduct, any record related to a sustained finding that an officer conducted an unlawful arrest or an unlawful search. Finally, there's other protections in POBAR for peace officers having the right of expression, having the right to run for office, that kind of thing. But I think primarily, if I read the room right, the biggest issues were around the confidentiality of peace officer personnel records and what could or could not be released through a subpoena or otherwise. So with that, if there are any questions concerning the peace officer Bill of Rights.
So you're saying that even if you had AB 1185 subpoena powers, the personnel files that are confidential per penal code section, this data couldn't be released even with subpoena powers unless one of these exceptions applied?
That's generally yes. That being said, there's been some litigation about that, and there is a push and pull between those. If there was a legitimate reason for some of the personnel files, and I can't off the top of my head think what that would be except for those categories, there could be an argument by the body that they needed to look at something further. It would have to be by court order at that point, but and there's certainly examples of various bodies going to court to try to get further information.
Okay. And if say the Board of Supervisors went to court to try to get some of that information because of a situation that had played out that for some reason we were aware of, and that information was subpoenaed, would that become public information or could that be shared with the board so that the board could take other action?
There are various ways it could be, a protective order could be placed such that it would limit those who could disclose it. The court has done that, particularly federal cases. There's usually a protective order in place to protect peace officer personnel files from disclosure, except for the parties involved in the litigation. It's my feeling that courts generally are not going to release anything unless there's an allegation of misconduct of some kind.
Okay. And then on the exceptions to confidentiality of personnel records, so when you talk about sustained findings, that's via an internal investigation.
Correct.
Can you explain what the internal investigation is, or what does that consist of?
Sure. I know the sheriff's on and Chief Anderson's right here, so they can correct me if I'm wrong. But generally, anytime there's a complaint against a police officer or a sheriff deputy, there'll be an internal investigation. Say it's somebody got arrested and they claimed that the officer used unreasonable or excessive force. There's going to be an internal investigation by the sheriff's office where they're going to interview all the witnesses involved. They're going to interview the deputy involved, and they're going to come to a conclusion as to the veracity of the complaint and whether unreasonable or excessive force was used. A sustained finding means that the sheriff's department found that there was indeed excessive force or unreasonable force. And those sustained findings would allow the records concerning the investigation to become public.
Okay, and if a sustained finding occurs, those records automatically become public,
They don't,
or they
they're
could
not
become public if someone asks
posted,
for them?
per se, but they could be public upon a request for those records.
Okay.
With it-
I went, Supervisor Sheriff Nieto, and I'm sorry.
Yeah, thank you for
Under
jumping
SB2
in.
Yeah, yeah, I'm sorry, everybody. I'm out of town on business that has to do with terrorism, so that's very, very important right now. But this is also important. Under SB2, which is a new law that passed within the last year, well, past 2 years ago, and it's been implemented by post this year. Under SB2, if it's a serious use of force, there's 9 categories that become automatically public record. In fact, any person can go onto the post website right now and see, and it's the decertification bill. They call it SB2, but it's a decertification law. And so those automatically become public record. And these are allegations of serious misconduct. The public can go on and look at the 9 categories. And we are obligated by law to release those. In fact, there are some things that are so serious that we're obligated by law to release them immediately. Again, the public at any time can go onto the website and look at the agencies to see what has been released under this new law or not released.
Okay, and I think we'll have either you or Eddie, Chief Deputy Anderson, review some of the memo that you put together. Just to clarify, so Sheriff, did you say that SB2 makes the certain allegations public or the sustained findings public of certain allegations?
When there's a sustained finding,
When there's a
it
sustained,
becomes
okay.
public. There are certain cases where that when like say an officer's arrested, it goes to post right away, and that may be released. There is one thing that they can release those right away because it's in the public interest to know about this stuff. And so this is a way that, and this is a new law that wasn't in effect under the former sheriff. It just took effect. And this is a way that those bad apples and those bad actors that are in our law enforcement profession, they don't move from agency to agency. In fact, we have an obligation, even when an employee leaves our employment, we have to complete the investigation in order to determine whether we're going to have a sustained finding and it would be releasable under decertification.
Okay.
And to support what the sheriff is saying, because of SB2. Way, even before the investigation begins. So that oversight is, it's there and we are adhering to that.
And can you speak a little bit about what an internal investigation, like who conducts that and what, is that just like my buddy, like my colleague tell us, right? Just can you explain how that, like how's the integrity of the internal investigations work?
So in the professional standards division, we have 2 dedicated internal affairs investigators. That's all they do. And that's their assignment. That's what they are trained to do. They specialize in that field. So as indicated earlier, once a complaint is received, it's assigned to either one of our investigators, which is overseen by our professional standards commander and myself. And they will contact all parties that were involved and collect any evidence that they can find. It's a fact-finding effort is basically what it is. Okay, we're just following the facts to try to determine if the violation or the complaint can be sustained or not. And that's where we look at video, if there's video or any other type of evidence that can be found as part of that investigation.
And supervisor and or both supervisors, one of the things that the sheriff's office is moving towards is that at the end of the year, we're gathering all this data so we can release to the public, because we believe in aggressive transparency. So we can release to the public the amount of complaints that were made, whether they were sustained, unsustained, whatever our findings are, and the nature of the allegation. We can legally release that information. We just can't get into the names and the particulars because of POBAR.
Okay, but that's dependent on who the sheriff is and the what this, but two questions.
That,
So the two
that's
dedicated,
correct. It is
okay.
dependent on who the sheriff is, but as you know, both supervisors know and the entire board knows that this law doesn't go away. This law is always on the books. And so this is not, we have to do this now or it never happens. There's always the opportunity to do what the board wants to do to help you guys govern the county.
Okay. Thank you. I think those were my questions. Do you have questions on this one?
I have no question.
Okay. I think I have other questions on our sheriff's memo, but I'll save these for that portion. Okay. And then do we want to do Hernandez litigation or this? Could we just go into the sheriff's memo right now? Because I think that ties into sort of.
You want to go forward with Hernandez litigation?
No, the sheriff's memo.
The sheriff memo. Okay.
Uh-huh. And so this, one of the things that we heard from the sheriff also at the last meeting was that there's lots and lots of oversight already in place. And there was sort of a verbal explanation of a lot of the different systems of oversight. So we asked in our follow-up meeting, the sheriff to provide us with sort of a memo that outlined what some of the oversight systems that were already in place were. The sheriff team put together this memo that outlines a number of different existing federal, state, and local oversight regulations. And links to where we can get more information or see the data specific to the reports that are already made available. So I learned a lot reading through this and tracking, reading through some of the different reports that are made public already, but we'll pass the floor to the sheriff's team to walk us through this.
Did you want to go over the entire memorandum? Okay, perfect. So as per this memorandum, we have a lot of oversight and I'll share what that means with you. As far as federal oversight, the United States District Court, Northern District of California, we have the Hernandez lawsuit, which is currently, you guys know that we are under that right now. And I think Susan's going to talk more about that later. Basically, the Hernandez federal settlement agreement has been in place since 2015. I believe we're supposed to plan to be out of this settlement over in the period of 5 years, but that has been extended, but we'll have more discussion about that later. We have the Law Enforcement Support Office, formerly known as the 1033 program. The Law Enforcement Support Office is a division under the United States Department of Defense responsible for managing our 1033 program, which transfers excessive weapons, equipment, and vehicles from the United States to civilian law enforcement agencies. So with that, we've released all that to the public and we monitor that and we get equipment from them that is necessary to support police services and the safety of our community. The state oversight that we have from the California Department of Justice, the DOJ has responsibility and authority to investigate suspected illegal activity conducted by law enforcement organizations in California. And this is also something that conducts an extensive monitoring of the use of law enforcement databases used by our local police and sheriff's office. We have another oversight for, it's called RIPA, and RIPA is known as the Racial and Identity Profiling Act. RIPA was designed and formed as part of AB 953. The Racial Identity Profiling Advisory Board is a diverse group of members that represent the public in different communities, and it's also made up of law enforcement and educators. At the direction of this legislature, their charge is to eliminate racial identity profiling and improve diversity and racial and identity sensitivity in law enforcement. So basically, every contact that's made by law enforcement with the public, they're required to enter data as to what was the reasons for that contact and what were the circumstances and the outcome of that contact. And we have to do that for every civilian contact that we make with our public. You may be familiar with POST, the California Commission of Peace Officer Standards of Training. POST has increasingly been giving more oversight and authority over the training and certification of our peace officers. Everything that we do, all of our training that goes through POST mandates the amount of hours in training that we have to have, and there's very specific guidelines with POST. We talked briefly about SB2 from 2021, and we say that because SB2 today is something different, but it deals with decertification of police officers. And there's a number of reasons why that may be necessary. It's unfortunate that we have to have a law that tells us how to do these things, because the way we commonly do practice and do our business is we hold people accountable, and that's just it's just the right thing to do. Holding people accountable could be through counseling sessions, it can be through training, or it can be through releasing people that have caused us to have to release them from being a police officer based on the circumstances. But the SB2, as far as decertification, it's very valuable because we do have law enforcement agencies that don't hold people accountable as they should. And this forces all of us to do the right thing when it's necessary. We talked about certain exceptions in releasing information, and we already kind of went over that. Anytime that we have a discharge of a firearm, incident involving great bodily injury, incidents related to sexual assault, sustained findings of dishonesty, sustained finding of excessive force, sustained findings of discrimination. These are all things that fall under some of the guidelines of the SB2 decertification laws that are in effect now. One of the things that we have to follow very strictly is our California standards of training for corrections, and we refer to that in our field as STC. STC sets and monitors the training compliance for correction staff, which includes our custody and control operation deputies, sworn staff assigned to the correctional functions and assignments, and are required to attend at least 24 hours of training relevant to custody operations specifically every year. So we're mandated by BSCC, which is the Bureau of State of Community Corrections, to make sure that we're providing that specific training in the corrections environment. We have our Medical Board of California's oversight. The Monterey County Sheriff's Office provides physicians to incarcerated persons housed in the Monterey County Jail through its contract with WellPath. And, WellPath is our current medical provider. And, we're responsible for making sure that our incarcerated persons are provided adequate treatment and care and are given all the things that they're needed to be healthy in our jail. Some of the local oversight that we have, you may be familiar with the Monterey County Civil Grand Jury. The grand jury has the authority to investigate any complaints lodged against any of the offices and departments of the county government, and we've worked with them directly as well. The Monterey County Sheriff's Office Professional Standards Division, that's the division that oversees our training, and also oversees our internal affairs investigations for hiring, recruitment, and make sure that we're all getting adequately trained and fulfilling the guidelines that are from post and BSCC and more. We have our district attorney's office, who has authority to investigate any complaint of suspected illegal activity conducted by any law enforcement organization in the county. We also have our Monterey County Health Department, our coroner's operations unit within the jail, and our local election process as well. One thing that we're hoping we will have in place next year, planned for fiscal year in 2024, is we were fortunate enough to receive a pretty significant grant to purchase and establish our body-worn camera program at the Monterey County Sheriff's Office. To speak more about the grant that we were awarded was for $600,000, which is amazing. This is intended for the implementation and deployment of the program. And again, it's planned for 2023, 2024. Body cameras are very important because they'll be utilized in the field for corrections operations in the jail. They can be beneficial to the department's evaluation of training and policy. They can also capture community member involvement with our deputies and capture the footage of things that are happening in the field that can assist us in many ways, especially when it comes to prosecuting offenders or recognizing training needs or identifying any other concerns during those contexts. That gives us the ability to work with those things. And if there's any questions, I'll field any questions from anybody.
Just want to thank you, Chief Deputy, for the extensive report here. As well, it's good to have that state, the state processes that are in place here. Of course, those are not always necessarily transparent here at the local level to see what's going on, which is one of the advantages to what we're talking about here and whatever oversight capabilities may be developed. And I know, we do have it here at the local level as well. I would say the closest representation here at the local level of what we're looking at is probably the grand jury, but the grand jury itself can only look at a few different cases at a time. So it's obviously extensive on the oversight that can go about. I think from the previous administration, there are obviously things that always get covered as well. So it's good to have this information on hand to evaluate and see what we have and where we need to go. So I appreciate that very much.
You're welcome. And, just to add a little bit more, the new administration takes these things very, very seriously. Under the leadership of our Sheriff Tiernieto and the EMT, the executive management team that she's brought on board, we really care about these things. And the oversight is there for a lot of different reasons, and we will follow all the laws that are there. But it's important for the public to know that I can't answer for what happened with the previous administration, but we appreciate the relationship that we've been able to establish with the Board of Supervisors since we've been here. And as you know, we've only been here 10 months, but we've made a lot of progress, and we've recognized that we have a lot of good people that are working for us, and we're very proud to be working with them. So we're excited to be a part of whatever this process ends up turning out to be.
Quite aware takes time to develop. I've only been here 10 months too. So
Thank you. Thank you. I think this memo for me was really helpful, and I actually learned a lot. We have a previous version that was a little less detailed. So I'm just cross-referencing some of my questions and notes. I'm just going to start at the beginning. So the links I think are really helpful. Do these links, if you click on them, actually, one question, can we make sure we get a copy of this posted on? Okay, perfect. I'm looking at different things here, didn't see it pop up. So the Hernandez lawsuit, is that a public document? And if you go to the US courts, does this take you to the public information about the Hernandez?
So the PowerPoint that I'm presenting today is public. The public can also go to the U.S. District Court website and look at anything that's been filed in Hernandez. I will tell you that it's up to something like 900 documents. So it's a lot, but those are public documents as well.
And does this link take you to that location, or once you go to that link, do you
I
have
think
to
the
find?
link takes you to the PowerPoint, I believe. I didn't set up the link.
Supervisor Under Sheriff Boyd, the link takes you to the U.S. District Court out of San Jose. It takes you to their website.
Okay. And then someone would have to know how to look for the Hernandez lawsuit to get access to those pages.
You would type in the name in the county of Monterey, and you should be able to find it.
Okay. So search from here. And then I know that there's, pardon. So also on that site, so that would be the actual settlement agreement. I know a lot of that is kept private or is not, confidential, but some of it has become.
The actual settlement agreement is not confidential, nor is the implementation plan. At one point, the settlement agreement was posted on the sheriff's website. I don't know if it still is, because that was back in 2015. So it may have been taken off by now.
And then for some of these other things like the disposition services, and I think that was on our agenda just this last week for the 1033 program. And so this link takes someone to the information about the program. Could we add, just for as we're trying to gather all the information, be able to share with our colleagues, could we add a link to the actual the staff agenda or the staff report that was presented to the board for the most recent?
You're talking about the sheriff memo, right?
Mm-hmm. What I'm trying to do is as we take this information in, we're also going to need to take information back to our colleagues. And I think the public has made it really clear that they're interested in knowing what information is available out there. And so this is helpful, but it's not helpful if there's not a way to find the public information that is accessible. There's lots of information that's publicly accessible, but if you don't know what to ask for or where to find
Right.
it or how to look for it, you don't know how to find it and you'll never see it. So part of accountability and transparency, part of oversight is saying, not just there's information out there, it's saying, here's the information that's available and I'm not going to make you go digging for it. So that's what I'm looking for
Yeah.
in this memo.
I'm looking toward our communications person.
Yeah.
You do not want me to
Supervisor
try to
Undersheriff Boyd.
post stuff.
One of the intents of the memo as well was, again, we're talking oversight, and the part of the intention of this memo was to drive the community to have the names of those that provide oversight to us, how they could find them, how they could reach out to them. It takes them to the U.S. District Court in San Jose. It takes them to the LEOSA program. It takes them to the BSCC. It takes them to the grand jury. These are all entities that have oversight over us that we want the community, and a big part of the way it was done that way, so the community knows where to go to make contact with those representatives or organizations if they have a concern with our operations, because then they can report that concern in their manner through the contact function. And then that entity can then continue to follow through on oversight on us. So that was part of why it was listed to take them there, is in addition to the data. So they know where to go to address oversight on us, to where they can report a concern on us, so that those entities can address it with us.
Got it. No, super helpful. And I think this is what I'd originally asked for. And as I'm listening and trying to read and just sort of looking at the public and reflecting on some of the feedback that we had last week, I think it could be helpful to also include a link if there is specific, the most current report or where you'd find or how you'd get to it. And maybe that's not something we task the sheriff with. Maybe that's something that we task, county CAO team with, helping us figure out how to get that information here so that this document is usable. It's a value, it becomes more valuable for anyone who wants to find information. I know so much of our job, or how much I feel of our job, is trying to figure out what are the questions that no one wants me to ask? What's the information that exists that I'm not supposed to know about? Not that anyone's hiding anything, but there's a lot of things that, are out there that if I don't know to ask for it, or I don't know to ask the question, I'm never going to get the answer that I'm maybe looking for, maybe not looking for. I'm not going to know what the context is. And so I think as we do this is part of what I'm trying to understand. How do we make sure that the information is accessible to the public? So, okay. So for many of these, my question goes back to that in the DOJ, as we think about jails. In this process, I learned that the State Board of Community Corrections, I think that was the BSCC, provides a biennial inspection of the Monterey County Sheriff's Office jail and court holding facilities, and that's a report that's put out. I guess that's a yearly report that's put out. I'd never received it or seen it before it goes to the sheriff, but having had a chance to look at it, it's helpful to say, oh, these are the things that they are looking at. These are the things that maybe I think they should be looking at, but aren't on this list. So I can now ask the questions about. So I'm looking for where are the rest of these kinds of documents that are floating around that I need to know to ask for. And I think the public deserves to be able to access and read as well. And I'll just also say, to your point, Chief Deputy, and to the sheriff and undersheriff on the online, having the relationship that we're working to build now is so important, and it's so critical to, I think, our shared goals. But part of my job is also to make sure that regardless of who the sheriff is, I know, and my future colleagues know where to look for the information that maybe isn't going to be shared with us in the future so openly or transparently. So I see this not just as an exercise for today, but as an exercise for the future. And the more that we can learn together, the better off we're all going to be moving forward. Okay, so let me go back to my so that was the BSCC received letters. I think someone said that in our last meeting, the Medical Board of California, the California Board of Psychology, and the California Board of Registered Nursing. Someone mentioned, or had a note about an auditing schedule, that they do an audit of provider certifications. But we were going to try to find out more information about how often they review certifications of folks who are working in our facility.
Under Sheriff Boyd, are you able to answer that?
Sorry, I lost a bit of my connection. What was, I apologize, Supervisor, what was the question?
Yeah, no, thank you. It's for the Medical Board of California, the California Board of Psychology, and the California Board of Registered Nursing. There was some reference, I had a note about that there was an auditing schedule that those boards conduct to ensure the certification of individuals who are working in the sheriff's office. And if there are complaints that are made to them about providers, there was some sort of auditing schedule. Are you?
I am not aware of their auditing schedule for that, when they audit their doctors or nurses. What I'm aware of is that those bodies do conduct investigations based on complaints that are submitted to them and can revoke licensing or penalize practitioners based on their own independent investigation of the circumstances.
Okay. And do we know if a complaint was made to the medical board of any one of these three agencies, would the sheriff's office be notified of that?
It is my belief that we would be notified as their employer through WellPath, but it is my belief because my understanding is when practitioners at hospital facilities are subject to complaint, the hospitals are notified.
Okay. And then I'm assuming there'd be some sort of internal investigation that would kick off within the sheriff's office also.
We would likely defer to the medical professionals to evaluate the standards of care that are listed in the complaint, as they have the basis for knowledge to determine if a violation occurred within the medical field. If there was a procedural issue with a security issue or something that was different, then the sheriff's office would likely conduct that investigation.
And Supervisor Askew,
Uh-huh.
this is Sheriff Nieto again. If we received a complaint, any complaint that comes in, we record it now. We record it. We may not be able to investigate it if it's not our employee, but is it recorded? Because that's part of preparing a report at the end of the year to show the public what we received and the findings to these things. In that case, the finding most likely, if it's just a contract employee, would be outside. It would be something like not a county employee. But we certainly, because it's on file, we certainly would follow up with the provider to ensure that an investigation was done on their behalf, and working with that provider, what the findings were with that investigation, because that may mean that we end the contract, or we say that employee doesn't come back. But that's with any county contractor. There, we have an obligation, including you as the board of supervisor, to take a look at those things.
Okay. And then on the let me see. Okay, I think this is any questions. Any questions? I did have another question. I'm sorry. I've got multiple pages of notes here from before. One question was on the final one where we talk about the office of the sheriff and really the power lies in large part to the public to hold the sheriff accountable through the election process. And I was just wondering, I know that there are many best practices and standards. I think the sheriff's office professional standards division was one that has responsibility for making sure all that happens. But do we have guidelines or best practices for transitions of leadership in a sheriff's office when there's a transition of power? And is that something that happens in other places? It's very few of our departments where we have responsibility for so many lives and so many absolutely critical functions, where we have an entire leadership team, move in and out on a fairly regular basis. And I'm just wondering what are some of the best practices, or what best practices should we be thinking about or looking at to make sure that we have that transition of leadership be as smooth as possible?
Supervisor Askew, this is Sheriff Nieto again, and I am actually a trained auditor. I don't keep the certification right now, but best practices really come from the military, and that is conducting an audit of operations, doing inventories of stuff. In the military, they call it a transition of command audit, And to me, that is the best practice for any organization if you're coming in with a new leadership team. And I don't know if they do that anywhere in the county right now. I'm sure when you became the Board of Supervisors, they didn't say, here's your checklist and here's everything we've done to prepare you. If they did, let me know and please send me copies of that.
Got it. But you said conducting a transition of command audit, and that's something that would allow sort of you to come in, like get the lay of the land, identify where deficiencies may exist, identify where things are going well, and then map out your path as a leader moving forward.
That's correct, Supervisor. One of the things that this administration has done is that we have reached out to our partners on best practices. We are working with the National Sheriff's Institute now. We are working with the Major County Sheriff's Association, who will actually come in and do some of these things for you at no cost. And, we work obviously with the California Sheriff's Association, but I can tell you that the previous administration did not develop that relationship both with the NSI and the Major County Sheriff's Association. And we're turning that around here under this current administration.
Okay, thank you. And then my final question was, I also had a note here about, jail. If something happens at the jail, where does that fall under this? Is that does it have to be a complaint that gets issued? And how would an incident at the jail get reported out or shared? Or is there a requirement for that within any of these accountability standard areas?
And just reference any incident at the jail, if there's
A significant incident at the jail that affected someone's health or well-being, I will defer to you to define what that is or could be.
whether it be at the jail or whether it be on patrol or whether it be at the sheriff's office itself, all incidents will be investigated to the professional standards unit and we'll be assigned to an internal affairs investigator. Unless you could be more specific about the incident, if you mean.
It's Supervisor Under Sheriff Boyd. Unfortunately, it's a broad definition of incident that covers from somebody falling down to somebody dying. And it's a broad spectrum because unfortunately, both of those things could happen. Now, with that in mind, every incident that occurs, depending on the level, will get resources applied for an investigation. In the jail, we might have, let's say, an altercation between two incarcerated persons. Well, that will start as a jail incident, and we'll have a jail incident investigation conducted following the rule books that are published within the jail for the incarcerated population. It could also lead to a criminal investigation being conducted by the jail staff and subsequent charges forwarded to the district attorney's office. If we're talking about an allegation of misconduct, well, that would start as a personnel investigation and would be handled through our professional standards and IA unit, and could lead to findings of being sustained or not, and then different types of potential discipline if it was a sustained finding. It could also lead to forwarding of that matter to the district attorney's office as well, depending on, again, if there was some kind of criminal violation that had occurred. With one of the things the sheriff has changed during this administration is unfortunately, when we have deaths in the jail, to create a higher level of transparency and mitigate the sheriff's office involvement in that investigation. We have begun utilizing out-of-county sheriff's offices for the coroner. They're not obligated to do so. We make a formal request, and we allow them to conduct the medical investigation into the cause and manner of death and to produce those findings independent of us, to create a level of transparency and ensure that we're not involved and for the public, so the public gets a heightened level. So there are different things, and different ones would be reported in different areas. If it's a jail-related matter, it's generally going to be incorporated into our Hernandez processing in one of the different monitors ways and be kind of reviewed at some point through the court process that exists for that. If it's a personnel action, then it would be published out in our annual report that'll be upcoming next year to kind of do a breakdown of those circumstances. So there's it's a broad question and it's a broad answer, but we're doing our best to ensure that transparency exists within all operations of the sheriff's office in the interest of the public.
Understood. Thank you. Those are all of my questions. So I think our final piece here for today is the overview of the Hernandez litigation, and then we'll open it up to the public. Thank you all for bearing with us. I think we'd hope to keep to an hour and a half, but we're probably likely going to go over because I do want to hear from the public.
This won't hopefully take too long. Let me try to share at least my part of it. I was asked to give a brief and public overview of the Hernandez litigation and where we are now. Please understand that it is still a litigated case, so there's some things I really can't go into, but I'll try to talk at the 1,000-foot level about the history and where we are now. And if we talk about the history of the Hernandez lawsuit, we really have to talk about 12 class actions that were lodged against the state over state prison conditions. The same firm that is involved in the Hernandez litigation, Rosenbein, was part of multiple law firms that sued the state. That litigation is still going, and this is an old number, but since 1997, the state has paid something like $139 million over the litigation involving conditions at their state prisons. More importantly to us, as a result of the consent decree over conditions at the state prisons, AB 109 was passed, which allowed for the first time sentenced felons to serve time in county jails instead of in state prisons. What this did was create an influx of inmates to the county jails. Admittedly, the county jails weren't prepared for the huge population increase, combined with the type of incarcerated persons now being held at the county jail for longer periods of time. You're talking about people with more serious medical care, with more chronic care conditions. What followed was the same law firms that had sued the state, sued the counties over conditions at the county jail, including the county of Monterey. And the Hernandez lawsuit was filed in 2013. It was filed regarding conditions at the county jail, in particular medical care, mental health care, safety and security, and ADA issues. In August of 2015, the court approved settlement of the class action, and the parties were directed to develop implementation plans for improvements at the county jail. If you will, the implementation plans were designed to effectuate the settlement agreement. Independent monitors were appointed in each of the 5 categories: medical, mental health, dental, safety and security, and ADA. The implementation plans took over a year to develop and get approved by the court. And the original monitors were appointed in 2016. Originally, the litigation. Oh, sorry.
What?
I think somebody is mute. Yeah.
She just muted it.
Okay. Originally, the lawsuit was going to be 5 years. The board has authorized extensions up through August 2025. It could go longer depending on what the court has found as to our release from monitoring requirements. I will say that there has been some difficulty with retaining monitors. We had our security and safety monitor resign. We had our first ADA monitor resign. We had a second ADA monitor unfortunately die. We had our mental health monitor resigned. And each time a monitor resigns, it on average takes about 6 months for the parties to agree to who will become the new monitor, and then additional time for the monitor to get up to speed on the litigation. We've also had several monitors diverge from previous direction as to how what best practices were and what needed to be accomplished for compliance under the implementation plans. Then the pandemic hit, and for a year and a half to 2 years, really nothing was happening because originally the monitors simply could not come into the jail. And then there were monitors that didn't want to come into the jail because of the COVID-19 outbreak. I will say that we did let one monitor did come to the jail to look at our COVID-19 practices. And obviously a lot of safety protocols were in place to keep that monitor safe, but they did come in to give us best practices, if you will, to try to keep people safe during the pandemic. I will say that, and this is an old number, over 1,000 inmates were vaccinated at the same time and got priority a lot of times for the vaccination because they were living in a congregate situation. At the same time, as I think everybody knows, there were medical provider shortages as a result of or after COVID, especially related to nurses. And the medical providers found themselves competing with the hospitals for employees. This is a statistic I think that a lot of people are interested in. And as you can see, unfortunately, suicide rates have gone up since the beginning of the litigation. This is a trend, unfortunately, nationwide. And unfortunately, in Monterey County itself, non-incarcerated individuals, the suicide rate in the past few years has gone up 20%. It's a significant problem that unfortunately is just complex, especially when you mix it with substance abuse issues. The Monterey County has done a number of things to try to change the jail to be more suicide resistant, if you will. The implementation plan only actually called for 4 cells to have these improvements. The sheriff's office instead made capital improvements to all of these housing areas to try to prevent suicides at the jail. This included weekly meetings to discuss difficult mental health cases. There's been policy and procedure changes to try to reduce suicides at the jail. One of the most important things they've done is the jail-based competency treatment program. As people may or may not know, when an individual is deemed incompetent to stand trial, before the jail-based competency program, they were sitting in the jail with significant mental health issues, waiting for a spot at the state hospital. This program allows treatment to start earlier in the hopes that individuals will not decompensate while they're sitting at the jail waiting for a bed at the state. Early access and stabilization services kind of go hand in hand with the JBCT and is another method of trying to avoid decompensation for seriously mentally ill individuals. There are also security and safety improvements at the jail with the new camera system and multiple ADA physical plant improvements as a result of the litigation. I am happy to answer questions with the caveat that if it goes too deep into litigation strategy, I will not be able to answer.
Just a few questions here on whatever I can gather on factual basis, basically, probably for the sheriff's department. It's one hoping I might be able to answer. So what year did the state start transferring felons into the county jail? Do we have an idea on that?
I should know. I think it's 2009, but I could be wrong. Sheriff or under sheriff? If they're still there.
Roughly 2010-ish.
Okay. We were only off a year, so probably.
That's close enough.
Yeah,
I mean,
this
on
is,
some of these
I'm sorry,
questions,
this is the sheriff. So the biggest transfer actually is under AB 109. And that was back in April of 2001 to answer your question, Supervisor. There's been an ongoing effort though. It might have started earlier. I think AB 109 is the one that affected the county sheriff's office the most.
so I'm assuming nobody really knows the hard numbers of how many inmates we had back at that time before this influx started. That's probably getting a little too deep into a questioning for us to answer this point. But around what percentage of the current inmates are actually would have felonies?
Good question. I don't have that data. I don't know if the undersheriff or sheriff has it. It's a significant, well.
I don't think that we can provide that data at this time unless the sheriff or sheriff have.
Yeah, this is the sheriff. I don't have those numbers, Supervisor.
About
We can
70%?
certainly get them to you. The biggest impact though, under AB 109 is that you shifted an entire population of
Hold on a
folks
second.
because of realignment. You shifted a population of folks that were held in state prisons into your county facilities. County facilities were never designed to hold people for long periods of time. We have people sitting in our jail for years now because of ISTA and how sentencing goes. We're also shifting populations of people that back in 2011, people from our prisons over to the county jails that have been convicted of certain crimes. And before, county jails, for the most part, were people that were convicted of misdemeanors under a year, or their sentencing was under the year. And people also have to remember, county jails hold people that are that haven't been through the justice system. So they're just incarcerated people. They may be innocent. That's how our justice system works. So we're mixing up, because of the realignment, we're mixing a lot of populations that current sheriffs now have to deal with that prior to 2011 we didn't deal with. And so this whole jail incarceration, it's not unique to Monterey County. This is a nationwide conversation that's going on as we look at realignment, not just here in California, but on a national level.
Well, thank you, Sheriff. That was actually the point I was trying to make, is just exactly what the composition has changed in the jail over the last 10, 20 years. What kind of internal stresses have come about in that way. And also was, for some comparison purposes, I'm just trying to get an idea of state prisons, of how many problems that we're experiencing, or are they experiencing as tradition? I'm assuming it's a lot more violent place. It's a lot place with a lot more deaths and things along that line. But just trying to put things in comparison here, so I can understand where we're at on the situation. I think the sheriff kind of covered some of my points and question on that.
And to add to that, Supervisor, I actually am double dutying here. I was dealing with an issue and I was talking to Chief Sanders, the Corrections Operations Bureau Chief. And roughly our jail population back in 2011 was comparable to where it is today. But our likely number of individuals on felonies in the jail is upwards of over 70%. We'd have to get a hard data number for you. So, and the thing to keep in mind with, as the sheriff indicated with AB 109, state prison population was running about 180,000 incarcerated subjects when 109 was implemented, and it drew it down to under 120,000 or less. And so, you're pushing 60,000 individuals from the state prison system to the county jail systems. And what you're doing is then through Prop 58, when the decriminalization laws occurred, a lot of felonies were then reduced to misdemeanors. So a lot of your local offenders were not being held in custody because the charging systems had changed, and you had more state prison type individuals being housed in the local county jail, so you didn't have space. And so that's the correlating effect. And then you're dealing with, now you have those individuals, you have a much higher, more sophisticated individual in custody, and the jails just aren't built for that. And they require higher level of care for medical, mental health, dental, all of that.
Undersheriff, I just want to make sure I heard your statistic correct there. You said that the current jail has 70% felons now, when 20 years ago we had 0.
No, we had people in. It's the level has grown, and our population now is upwards of 70%. I apologize for the confusion on that.
I'm sorry. What's upwards of 70%?
The number of our incarcerated population that is currently in house on a felony related charge.
Okay, that was, I think, what I stated, that we have 70% that are
There's
now
0%
felons
from the past.
and 0% in the past. Yes, that's exactly what I wanted to get clarified.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay. I think that opens up a whole nother issue. I'm not going to go into at this point of just how we have changed on our security over the 20 years, but thank you for the information.
And just, to say thank you, Susan, for presenting on this. I think that there's a lot of interest from the public in understanding what the Hernandez lawsuit is, or settlement is, what it does. And I also recognize, and I hear hesitation from the county in wanting to share too much. So I kept pushing and saying I wanted this information to be public. I think you've made a good first step. And I think, pardon, for anyone who is also interested, knowing that the actual settlement agreement is posted online is something that would be, if you're interested in learning more, something to look at. So going back to the actual settlement, the parties in the settlement, who were the parties in the settlement agreement?
The parties in the settlement were County of Monterey, the plaintiffs representing the class action, and at the time it was CFMG, which is now WellPath.
Okay. And when we say the County of Monterey, is that the County of Monterey, the sheriff, or is that the county of, who is that? Who is
the County of
who
Monterey?
holds the bag on that specifically? And I think I know the answer, but I'm just asking it to be.
It's the entire county that holds the bag on it. It's the public entity, the County of Monterey. It's obviously the jail is run by the sheriff's department.
Okay. And I've also heard that
The
county
supervisor
thank
of
you.
any of the settlements, you are the signatory, the board, well, not you specifically. The Board of Supervisors, this is the signatory on that because you are the governing body for the county.
Correct.
Okay. And then WellPath or CFMG or whoever was that leadership group. And we still have, so that was the group that was in the settlement agreement back in 2013. They continue to be a part of that settlement agreement now, which is why they were in the recent court hearing.
Correct.
And then the reports from, and something a little bit rhetorical and like answer what you're comfortable answering, but the reports from the monitors that come out. So if the County of Monterey, meaning WellPath and the Board of Supervisors are the signatories, is there a reason why the Board of Supervisors doesn't receive those monitor reports? Who sees those monitor reports?
So
and I'm sorry to put you on the spot, but I think it's a relevant question that needs to be asked.
I will tell you what the court has ordered certain portions of the monitor reports to be released. Those have been released and those are public. There is, and I remain concerned about specific personal identifying information, specific information about mental health care, specific information about substance abuse, specific information about medical. In particular, with some of the suicides, it's not difficult to read the medical report and know exactly who the reports are talking about. And that is about as sensitive information as you can get. The court has released portions of pretty much all of the medical and mental health report, minus redaction of the names, and that's for the court, and to me, the court only to make that decision, because otherwise I think the county, and again, I don't want to get into legal, but there is a liability issue with relating private information related to medical and mental health care.
Okay, so when those monitor reports come back, they go to the sheriff. Who sees them? Who are they addressed to?
So they're addressed to the parties to the litigation. And obviously throughout the litigation, I communicate with various people at the county, and that's as comfortable as I'm gonna
Okay,
get.
I'm not looking to interrogate you here. But I think that, as I continue to learn more and more about this, again, I'm at this place where it's like, okay, if I don't know what question to ask, I don't know how to ask it. I understand that there are, there's a whole, and I'm sensitive also to the public. There's a whole series of conversations, one-on-one that I'm having with you and with, the sheriff, and trying to understand, like, where's the information that's public that we can ask about? Where's the information that's confidential that we can ask about? But as a signatory, as a party to ultimately holding responsibility for all of these things, knowing where the questions are that I need to be asking, knowing where the information is that I need to be asking about, I feel like we're still kind of like navigating this path. And so for myself, as well as I feel like we're navigating it for the public, so that the public says, okay, so we know that there's a Hernandez lawsuit that has a lot of oversight involved in it, but we don't know where to find that. We know that there's some reports that have been made public, but they're in a different location than or they're maybe in the same location.
If I could suggest the link that the sheriff's office provided on their memo will get you to each and every publicly filed monitor report.
Okay, that's helpful. Okay. Okay, I think those were my questions about Hernandez litigation, but I do think this is one where I felt like it was really important that we share this information with the public, because this information ties back into all of these other things we're trying to figure out. So having asked all my questions, we can, I think, maybe open up to the public. Okay, let's open up to the public. For anyone who's online with us tonight, there were a couple of questions asking about the survey and making it open again, or somehow sharing, please communicate with us. Just put your thoughts in an email and send them to the board so that we can see them. We receive those emails, and we'll get it typed into the memo line. It's cob@co.monterey.ca.us. We received many comments in addition to the survey questions. I really appreciate the comments that we've received. It's helped me frame my questions. It's helped me frame my thinking on this topic. And so I would encourage you, make your voice heard, let us know what you're thinking, put it in writing. I would even argue that the comments that we receive in writing, are more informative than what we're getting a yes or no question to, or a demographic answer about your age. But with that, let's, can we do, is 2 minutes fair? I just want to honor everyone's time. It is 7 o'clock. We've been here for an hour and a half, and we've got a bunch of folks online as well. So we'll run 2 minutes, monitor, and really appreciate y'all being here tonight.
Thank you, District 2 resident. That last interaction with the Assistant County Counsel was a bit concerning, because if the county's involved in litigation, my first question would be, who's driving the litigation and what position the county takes? I'd recommend the Board of Supervisors request an update in closed session. I mean, I don't think that's out of the ordinary. I always wondered how litigation gets decided, and is it really the county, and who is the county, who's driving these positions? So I tell you to specifically request the county council provide one during closed session. And I'd like to say, this is not about Sheriff Tina Nieto, because her leadership has, I mean, we've just gone in such a great direction. It really is about the community and the future of Monterey County. I remember when I met with Tina Nieto for the first time, it was in Chris Pereira's office. And along with her expertise and experience and her vision, one of the conversations we had was about the Sheriff's Oversight, the Citizens Sheriff's Oversight Committee, and she was in full support at the time. I just am concerned that the conversation, although a lot of great information, has taken a lot of twists and turns. I think some of the questions that were asked, although they had good intentions, if you ask me, should we take sheriff's deputies out of patrol and put them to do something else, I'm going to say no. I think every resident in Chular and Gonzales is going to say no. I would prefer to have that question in a different way. I'd also like to know, how did the underserved communities of Monterey County, which there are many of who do not participate in online surveys and do not have this opportunity to come to these things. I got to get home personally. But you know, one of my friends, his name is Mitch, always says, are surveys really a true representation? Because who can participate? And also, what are we doing to remove duplicated responses? Right, 300 is not very much, but I know public participation is difficult. You know, we could do call surveys. We need to do something a little more creative than 300 calls and whoever could show up to these meetings. And I just want to end it with saying this bill authorizes, as Supervisor Askew said, the county to establish this to assist a board. Why would we not want to be assisted? I urge you to move forward. Supervisor Alejo, I remember the article very clearly. He wanted to wait for the new sheriff, but it doesn't have to do with Tina. I think Tina's great. It has to do with the community, and we need to put these safeguards in place, not just for now, but for the future. Thank you.
Hi, thank you very much. Dr. Alan Hoffa, a Monterey Council member, speaking as a private resident. Regarding the survey, it's good that you're seeking output, but obviously too small of a sample size. I think you guys get that. And in terms of the demographics, it would be helpful to know the racial demographics of the people that were surveyed, as well as their socioeconomic status. And I think Supervisor Church brought up a good point about the unincorporated versus incorporated. One of the things that became clear in this meeting is that transparency and public access to information is a real issue. I can tell that you, the supervisors, get that. It's an issue that affects you. We heard from your legal counsel that you're responsible for the Hernandez decision. Ultimately, you're responsible for oversight, but you're not getting the reports. That's a problem. It's a problem for you. It's a problem for the public. So that has to be addressed. It's great that SB 2 is providing information to the public, but again, and I heard this from you supervisors, how does the public even know that exists? If it is, how do we know how to find it? We need a kind of a local place where that information is accessible. All of the information relative to these issues need to be centrally located, locally accessible, and clearly communicated. So you are responsible for oversight of the jail. You're responsible for oversight of the sheriff's department, ultimately. So you need to get that information. We also heard in terms of WellPath, it sounds like the sheriff herself doesn't really have direct ability to kind of provide that oversight. You're not able to do it. Somehow you need to figure out how to get a grip on providing the proper oversight for WellPath, because we know that there are issues there. And then in closing, I support community involvement in the oversight process. I think it's just important in terms of building and sustaining the trust. And I think a inspector general would provide them with the expertise so that they are respectful of the law and do things in the proper way. So thank you very much.
Good evening. My name is Eric Sand. My son, David Sand, died in the Monterey County Jail a year ago yesterday. And I've put together a lot of thoughts about how that happened. His mother and I were adamant. David suffered from severe schizophrenia, and he was tossed between behavioral health in Monterey County and the justice system, and nobody wanted him. He was conserved once, and the county dumped him in Santa Clara County, where he was promptly arrested again for assault. He went through a whole legal process up there. This was totally needless. All he needed to be was conserved, and his death could have been avoided. There needs to be something done to house people that are not criminally liable. He suffered schizophrenia. You know what he went to jail for the last time? He threw a rock at a fire engine. And the judge sentenced him to 1.5 years in jail, no treatment. I'm getting a little worked up because his mother and I spent 10 years working with the county, 10 years, and resulted in his death. What I have to say about the sheriff's department, we called the sheriff's department many, many times at my house, my office in the Carmel Valley Village. The sheriffs were exemplary. They knew, they treated David with respect. We were having problems. There was a medical person there that showed up. She was very discreet, indicating that how the sheriffs were to handle him. What is going on in the jail is a totally different world. The sheriffs out on patrol are exemplary. I just was totally amazed at their professionalism. But what's going on in the jail is beyond belief. And I take very close exception to the county council saying it's your responsibility. They're the ones with WellPath, their attorneys, that held these reports back from the public. A year ago, that contract with WellPath was renewed. If those inspection reports had been public, I doubt that would have happened. What was the basis for that contract being renewed? Was there anything in writing? How about WellPath's performance? Where was that? Anyway, I do not want to see any more deaths in Monterey County Jail. Something needs to be done regarding mentally ill patients. They are not criminals, but they are being treated as criminals and thrown in with criminals. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Sofia Cortez, and I just want to say the survey would have been successful. My question when hearing about the survey, you guys did an amazing job. I don't want to bash them or anything, but what areas in Salinas did they go to? I never seen it on social media. And honestly, I really don't see local news or channels. What ethnicities participated in this survey? Was anybody of the 300, did they ever experience Monterey County Jail? Let's talk on that. I have. I'm sorry for your loss. I'm Sofia Cortez, and I stood before you guys a couple of months ago. I do not trust Monterey County, not because of my health or anything, but because a judge here in Monterey County ruled in favor of my factual innocence petition under identity theft. What happens with our identity? Are you in compliance with that order, the amended order that came out in September to remove my information? No, they're not. They put it in a link. I requested this information. It's 2 years now. You guys do not give people their information. You personally stopped me from getting my reports, my information. And Tina, let's talk on her. Her only solution when I went to her office with Mr. Chris Pereira was, if you are looking for compensation, I do not carry a checkbook. You're going to have to sue the county. And I said that to you guys. That should never be your solution. What is going on in there? Nobody has told me about anything. I've asked. I want the deputy's name, and laws have changed. Yeah, the laws have changed. Their immunities are no longer the same as they used to be. Because in 2022, Section 135110.8, under the investigation process, they don't have immunities anymore. So, with that being said, and although Susan here has received information in regards to speaking with me about my United States Northern District, California case that they are not aware of, Okay? I'm still waiting for a phone call. I'm not trying to be a bad person.
Thank you. Is there anyone else? Sorry, is there anyone else in chambers who would like to speak tonight? And we do have a handful of hands raised online, so we'll just keep moving through folks in chambers.
Thank you. Honorable Supervisors, 2 minutes is not a lot of time. I'll just try to cut to the chase on some of this. So I appreciate both of you bringing up two very important areas. North County, we didn't hear anything about that survey, and there's other areas in pockets, South County as well. This is very important to me, so I have been just surveying the many committees and groups that I'm a part of. Not many people heard of it at all. I agree with the last statement. Who were these 306 people? That's just such a small number to then make important decisions for about all of this. And we are talking about health. We're talking about death. We're talking about all types of areas that are very, very important to probably every citizen here in Monterey County. So for me, I'm looking at the big picture. I want this sheriff to be successful. The past sheriffs, my goodness, there's issues, many issues. But I do agree, it's the jail. It's what's happening in the jail. And you need to have some level of oversight there and try to decide how to go about training, development, best practices. I'm so glad you brought up some of those areas, Wendy. So at the end of the day, for me, we all want meaningful oversight. We need trustworthy data. We need to provide it to us. You need to have it, supervisors. I'm a professor. My goodness, data says something. And how can you make a decision if you don't have it? My goodness, I was mortified when I kind of heard that a little while ago, that you don't even have some of that. The AB 109 did change a lot of things. The sheriff is correct there. I worked in the criminal justice system, have 4 decades of having done that, and 4 generations of individuals in my family that have worked in the system. So we want oversight. We'd like a civilian group to be a part of that. I think there should be some law enforcement people on that group as well, so that we can have their input and information. So I have a whole lot more. I wish we could talk more about this. I wish we had more time, because this is serious and we need to get it done. We want to work with you. We want to help you in this. So I guess I'll stop there. Thank you.
Good evening, Supervisor Askew and Supervisor Church. My name is Chris Barrera, President of LULAC Council 2055. I am here to advocate for the Monterey County Sheriff's Office Citizens Oversight Committee. Yes, the same oversight committee that was promised when our new sheriff committed to when she was campaigning last year. And that's the main reason why we supported her. Yes, Tina is great. She's a lot better than what we had and what we could have had. So we totally support Tina. The survey that's being talked about, I never even heard of that survey, and I'm the president of LULAC. So if it was sent to me, we could have dispersed it accordingly. The community deserves the promises made to be kept. The community deserves transparency. The community deserves to be updated when somebody dies in the jail. When a simple press conference, when that happens, that would do so much for the community. But I am not here to pass judgment on anyone. God knows it's tough being a law enforcement officer, and I have the utmost respect for our Monterey County deputies and all law enforcement officers. But when promises are made, they should be kept. We at Monterey County have gone through a lot the past decade with previous leaderships here at the sheriff's office, and he had no oversight, from using his own deputies as chauffeurs, misappropriation of funds, sexual affairs with subordinates, target of recall, censure, sexual harassment and retaliation. The list goes on and on and on, and he did not have any oversight. Transparency. Andrew Sandoval made a PRA request a while ago, and it states, your request has been received. In order to proceed with the search of the requested documents, I need to gather a little more information from you. I need your address, phone number. I also have a few questions. Are you a lawyer? If so, what law firm is requesting these documents? If not requesting, what organization? You're not allowed to ask those kinds of questions. And this was sent by Miss Ruiz from Professional Standards in Monterey County. So please enact the Citizens Oversight Committee. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Arlene Hoff. I'm chair of the Monterey County chapter of the ACLU, and I also didn't know about this survey other than when Wendy mentioned it at the Zoom in July. I never got a copy of it. Less than 0.1% of the population has responded, so I don't think it's actually a valid survey based on statistical analysis. The sheriff is a peace officer and reports to the attorney general, so the County Board of Supervisors does not have subpoena power over the sheriff. This Citizens Oversight Committee and the Inspector General would have subpoena power and could get you information that you might have to do your job. The only oversight committee that I heard the deputy sheriff mention that had any civilian presence was RIPA. And I looked into it thinking, oh, that's exciting. Maybe we have civilian oversight, but it is actually a state board. All of the oversight we heard of is either federal or state level. I also applaud, Sheriff Nieto for her goal of transparency. And I just wish she would be the leader on this. She could build meaningful trust between her office and the future holder of that office and the community by allowing the civilians to provide some of the oversight, along with an inspector general who could work beside Susan in terms of making sure that everything is done legally and everything is on the up and up. I married a lifeguard and, there was a lot of oversight at the beach. Some of it was just like, it seems stupid, right? You had your tag, it was a certain color, you were allowed to go canoeing or you could do this or that. And you had to put it on the board. They would do like buddy up and they would call this weird chant and the scouts all had to like hold each other's hands. We're together, we're still here. But when that failed, it was the scariest thing. The lost bather drill, but knowing what to do helped keep the guardrails. And I view this oversight as that. Keep the guardrails when you can and not have to look at other people like Mr. Sands and say, I'm so sorry for your loss.
Hello, my name is John Young. I'm a retired police officer. And as I hear three words being tossed around here quite a bit, transparency, subpoena, and oversight. And they kind of have an overlap because oversight being what I really think is the key to it all. Oversight being not just out there to prosecute police officers, punish police officers, or manipulate them somehow. Oversight would be being totally involved with the department in coordination with the community, a kind of ombudsman type situation. The oversight committee could not only be there. Review board means after the fact. We don't want after the fact. We don't want the event to happen. So let's go after the fact. Let's keep away from that and think about the things that can be proactive, such as having the oversight committee being involved in promotions of police officers internally, to be involved in the hiring process, maybe not the investigations and all that, but the final interview with the prospective police officer, things like that. Even when a special team comes together, we heard about the Scorpions in Memphis. I mean, who allows their people to go around with badges and guns named Scorpions? I mean, and it's actually an acronym for, never mind, Special Police Committee. I don't know. So have oversight of all those things, be involved in the police department and not just in review. And finally, we hear subpoena being tossed around a lot. Well, a subpoena has to be signed by a judge. A subpoena is an order by a judge to come before him. So an oversight committee cannot just get a subpoena. They have to have some substance behind it. Therefore, your oversight committee is going to have investigators, It's going to have a staff, and these things cost. The oversight board itself should be paid individuals. You don't want volunteers. I mean, volunteers come and go. They tend to be extremists. So you want paid professionals there who've been trained, in committee meetings and Robert's rules, things like that. That should all be part of it to make it legitimate, to get the subpoenas, to do the oversight, and finally, community safety can be the final goal. Thank you.
Is there anyone else in chambers? Otherwise, we'll go online. We have, if you would like to speak and you're online, if you could raise your hand now so we can keep track of everyone. It is almost 7:30. We've gone over time, but we do want to make sure we hear from folks. I do just want to mention, if you don't have the chance to speak, or if you want to put your thoughts and comments, we would appreciate an email at cob@co.monterey.ca.us. But if you're with us and you'd like to speak, we'll start with the phone number ending in 058 and then go to Malika Velasquez and then to Kathy P. So phone number first, then Malika, then Kathy P.
Hello, good evening, and thank you to Supervisor Askew in church. I would like to go ahead and make a comment right now regarding some issues that is happening on a loved one at the jail. You know, my only concern is that this inmate that's in church in jail has CHF, congestive heart failure, among other issues. A so-called nurse comes in and the inmate asks, the name, and the nurse just says visitor, points it to a badge that says visitor. At one point, she was given, this inmate was given a pill, and the inmate says, I don't know, I don't recognize this pill. What is this pill? And she says, I don't take it, refuse to take it. The visitor says, I'll be right back. Comes back, she says, oh, wrong Diaz. That's ridiculous. I have some other community members that have called and talked to me about being diabetics, and they don't listen. They don't take the I'm getting nervous because I'm running out. But anyways, they don't take the notes that they send, seriously. And I believe that we really need the oversight committee. I was not aware about the survey, and I wasn't aware about the meeting today. So I really appreciate, and I hope that you guys really consider having this oversight committee and look in this well path, because somebody's going to die there. They're giving wrong medications, and they're not taking, medical issues, seriously. I thank you very much.
Thank you. We'll go to Mayika and then.
I'm sorry. I don't know if you guys can hear me or not. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
I can hear you.
Okay, just want to make sure. So I too did not hear about the meeting today. Luckily, Jacqueline told me in our meeting this morning, and so that's why I'm appearing via Zoom. I was actually trying to make it there and I wasn't able to. But as stated earlier, demographics do matter, and I'm wondering how the outreach worked on this. I mean, I think that, whatever they're doing, they maybe want to add local churches, other community organizations, even, sending out emails to government employees, whether it be, city or state. Being a Seaside resident, I still have to interact with, the sheriff's office. If I'm driving through Prunedale or, somewhere else that might be considered unincorporated or rural land, or, within like a 45-mile radius. So I think it's important that we're notifying pretty much all of Monterey County, because it's a smaller county. It's not like Los Angeles County. It is a somewhat small county, and within a 30-minute drive, you could be in an unincorporated area. So I think that we do need to do better with the outreach. In regards to the oversight, which, as previously also mentioned, was a part of the sheriff's campaign, it is very, very important. I currently serve on the Seaside Community Action Safety Commission, and this, even though it's a new commission, it has opened up lines between the city police department and residents. As for the conditions in the jail, That's actually very personal to me because I had a brother that did serve time, but he was lucky enough to get his record expunged and turn his life around. And so, you know, the individuals in that facility that may or may not be guilty have value, and we need to understand that, and we need to treat them as human beings. And if there is something happening, there needs to be transparency around that. Also, as the mother of a special needs child, I'm currently following a case of a young man in Florida with six or seven diagnoses. He's neurodivergent. But this young man at 17 is now facing possibly 30 years in prison. And again, this is someone that has a neurological, well, actually multiple neurological diagnoses, that is facing prison, that's, you know, being criminalized for something that he's done that maybe, had there been proper supports in place, that might not have happened. So there definitely needs to be more done concerning our neurodivergent population, our unhoused population.
Supervisor, this is Sheriff Nando. I lost audio. Is it just me?
Please comment and then Sharon Miller. Kathy, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Is it my turn?
It's your turn. Yep. 2 minutes are
Okay.
on the clock. And then
Okay, I'm
followed by
gonna try to be quick. My tale is one of sexual harassment, and I want to right now say this was the previous administration. So when I mention ranks, it's not this administration, but it's a huge loophole. I was being sexually harassed by the undersheriff at the time. He would send me sexual text messages in the middle of the night. I went to my supervisor, who didn't want to help me at all. I had to then confront the undersheriff, who's the number 2, which is scary for people, and get him to stop. At the time, I asked if there was anyone else. He said no. I later find out one of my subordinates was going through the same thing I did, and it was horrific. It was far worse than what I was dealing with. I again went to my supervisor, who again refused to do anything, said things like, oh, we don't know for sure that this is happening. He kept promising me deal with it, and then he didn't. At one point, it really mushroomed out of control. Her husband saw text messages, and it was very damaging to her relationship. And this was no fault of hers. I was forbidden to talk to the undersheriff about it. We eventually got nowhere. I was told that, you know, we were all consenting adults and it was a non-issue. I had to make a civil rights complaint to get something done. Now, mind you, this went on for years. Civil rights hired an outside entity to do an investigation. Every complaint I made was sustained. The other females' complaints were sustained. I don't know if all of them, but I know some were sustained. What came of that was nothing, because it was outside of POBAR. So there was nothing that the sheriff did to either of these. One retired, one ended up getting promoted. You know, I ended up getting transferred after making the civil rights complaint. So there needs to be some sort of oversight to protect people that are going through these types of things, because it's up to the sheriff's office, the upper administration, to decide what they are going to investigate and what they won't investigate. So it's not as simple as, yes, we investigate. They have to decide to investigate. And if it's your upper management that's doing the bad things, they're not going to investigate. That was the loophole I found myself in. It was very disheartening. the last year of my career was
Kathy,
horrible.
sorry, we're out of time for your comment, but thank you for joining us today. And again, I would just encourage you to send additional comments via email. And I will suggest too that for our sheriff's memo and oversight, that adding the civil rights office might be a good additional add of local oversight that we have here. So we're going to move on to, what did I have here? Sharon, then Pam Sexton, then Bernie Gomez. Sharon, you should be able to unmute.
Yes, I just unmuted. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you.
I want to thank the sheriff for all she's doing to improve the county jail. And I also want to thank the county staff and Wendy and Glenn, because you're helping to educate us to the complexities of administering the jail. However, I'm very concerned that I listened to friends and acquaintances who supported Sheriff Nieto's candidacy, and now they're expressing disillusionment at her lack of support for the civilian oversight that could help develop stronger communication and trust in our community. But the bottom line, what I've learned tonight is that it's complicated. So thank you for an opportunity to say something, and I will lower my hand and mute again. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Pam Sexton, followed by Bernie Gomez, and then we'll move over to the sheriff.
Hi, thank you. Yeah, first I wanted to just give my condolences to Mr. Sands, and it's for all of the terrible stories that I've read about and continue to hear about. I'm really grateful to have this meeting and this opportunity to talk about this, and I just see that there's obviously only benefit in having a community-oriented and community-open civilian board to do oversight. I'm calling in as a parent, as a teacher, as a resident of an unincorporated area. I'm in North Monterey County. It's good to see my supervisor here, and I am someone who tries to stay connected to what's happening in my community, and I never heard about the survey. I never saw it. I was visiting my parents over the summer, but I think it's clear from what's been said that the survey is not valid. So I just hope that that our county won't publish it as if it is. And in my short time left, I want an independent committee. It needs to have authority to do subpoenas. It needs transparency and real transparency, where the public, and that's why the importance of it being with the community involvement, and also the capacity. It needs funding, and I think those funds should come from the funds that are already allocated to security, because this is a way to prevent the kind of tragedies that Mr. Sands has described and Kathy described. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comment. Sheriff Nieto, I'm going to give you the final word, but we're going to go to Bernie Gomez, and then we'll give the sheriff a chance to make any final remarks, and then make some closing comments.
Yeah, well, good evening, and appreciate everybody's time here. I think I'm gonna keep my comments short. I was, posting on the chat, right, just throughout the whole time. It's like, did this ad hoc committee or did anybody ever, the county ever think about directing staff or someone to actually, I don't know, investigate or do some research about the benefits of having AB 1185, or having an Inspector General's office implemented, right? It seemed like there was a lot of information that kind of leaned towards, we don't need more oversight, right? Kind of leaning more towards like a con of having an Inspector General's office, right? But I'd be interested if the county, if this ad hoc committee, is would be willing to direct staff to investigate, research, what are the benefits of it, I know Santa Cruz County just implemented their Inspector General's office. We've met with them, right? And besides, my name is Bernie Gomez, right, with Milpa. So I go back and forth doing this type of work, and essentially 1185 is like, in essence, creates like a ombudsman person for the county for adults, almost, ombudsman person being a juvenile thing, so it just allows community, right, to gives community another outlet, another line of open line of communication with any types of complaints, or anything that has to, yeah. So, and the last thing I'll say is that it gives the county at least a due diligence, right? A tool to do your due diligence when dealing with the department that you essentially have no control over. So, thank you, and yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Bernie. I'm going to give it to the sheriff for some final comments, and then the supervisor and I will make some comments, and then we'll wrap it up.
Thank you, Supervisor. As you know, I've been talking with both the subcommittee and the other supervisors about oversight. And I think the misinformation out there is the sheriff is now against oversight, and that's not the case based on the conversations we have. I have asked the Board of Supervisors because it's your decision on which direction you want to move. And so I've given the pros and cons. I've told them what oversight's there, why I support some things over other things more, or do we even need it? Because I'm asking those questions that people should be asking. For people just to throw out the survey, that's also not fair. If the survey had gone a different way, would they say, oh, this is a great survey? I don't know. Is the people in these rooms that just their opinion? I don't know. Because the job of the subcommittee is a fact finding. You guys are on a fact finding thing. And so the documentation that our sheriff's office has provided is to be fact finding. And I'm not going to share with the public because I don't want to influence the board. I've shared with them, privately. And when we talk about this stuff, what I think might be the best model for our county. I don't think taking $1.5 million from the sheriff's office is the best way to provide that oversight, because it's a piece for the governing body to look at certain things. And I think that the public thinks that this committee would have more powers than what the law allows it to do. So I just wanted to clear that up because I keep hearing people saying, oh, she's against oversight. And you guys know that that's not the case, because we've had many, many conversations regarding how best to do it. The other thing that I want to make very clear to the public is that anything the Board of Supervisors is asked to see, we're there to provide it to them. And you guys know that. We're trying to be very transparent, but there are certain limitations under the law that there are some things we can't share. Whether there's a committee, there's an oversight committee or an inspector general or whatever, we still can't share it because of how the law is set up, unless the judge comes in and subpoenas it. And that's about it. So, but thank you. Thank you for this opportunity to be able to help educate our communities about the sheriff's office. And we're here to answer any questions, both to the board and to the community when they have questions about our office.
I always find these enlightening, just from the facts and information that comes up, personal stories that are relayed out, which are very, very important in understanding where we're at, how we got here. The survey, I think we all know, is not perfect. It wasn't a scientific survey. I do think there's some tidbits from it that are important. Some of them I mentioned earlier. For me, one thing that came out that was totally new for me tonight was to learn that 70% of the jail has felons, and that 20 years ago we did not. And that to me shows that there has been a drastic change in what this jail was and what it has become. So I have a whole new set of questions my own self on just how we've adapted to that, or if we have adapted adequately. And I'm sure this is a problem that's facing every county through the state for what probably wasn't one of the most well thought out policies by the state of California. So I just want to kind of leave it at that, but I really want to thank everybody for your constant vigilance and your input and your thoughts.
Yeah, again, I just really appreciate all of the feedback that we've had. And I think for me, I keep coming back to, what I went through in my initial time on the board and in my first 2 years on the board was a very different relationship and a very different dynamic than what we have now. And it led me to say, I need to do everything I can to make sure that I'm fulfilling my obligation to my community. And what are all of the tools that are available to me? I want to explore all of them. I want to understand all of them. AB 1185 could be one of those tools. And so let's figure out how it fits into the big picture and if it's going to add value for me to be able to fulfill my obligation to my community. So just as context, the feedback we've received verbally, the feedback we received, anecdotally in the survey, the feedback that's come in via email, the conversations that I've had one-on-one with folks, I appreciate all of that. The information that the sheriff has put together, I really appreciate. I think we can add value to that memo by adding in some of the more direct links to information and making sure that people know know exactly what they're looking for and how to find it. And I think we've given that direction to our team. In terms of outreach efforts, I appreciate the feedback from folks. We've made a tremendous effort to try to increase the county's outreach capacity and communication capacity. And I just want to commend Nick Pasculi for everything that you've done. If you're not following our county social media accounts, please do. If you're not following your local district supervisors' social media accounts or their email newsletters, please sign up for those. A lot of information flows out that way. And if you're not receiving county communications about things of interest, please make sure you, again, send an email to the Board of Supervisors or directly to Nick Pasculi so we can make sure that LULAC and NAACP and anyone else who wants information as it's being sent out, that you're on our distribution list for these things. We are working hard to try to build that list and keep it open. In terms of next steps for this and for us, I appreciate it's a lot of information. I need to sit down again with my colleague Glenn. I think we need to take a closer look at the feedback that we've had. We're going to have to, I think, in some way take this information, condense it, figure out how to bring some options back to our colleagues so that we can open up the lines of communication. And there's a lot of education that we're going to have to bring back to our colleagues about what all is in place. And then we're also going to need to, I think, understand and make some recommendations about what some of the options for us as a community to move forward might look like. I would hope that we can do that in collaboration and partnership with the sheriff, with county council. But I think we're going to have to sit down and put our heads together. It's possible that we may schedule another public meeting to daylight some of our recommendations. I think we haven't really talked about that yet. So what I'd like to do is take all of this back, sit with it for a minute, map out a little bit more about I would like to continue reading more about some of the reports that are publicly available, and then reconvene. So if you want to make sure that you're getting notices for this particular meeting, Nick, if we could put your email address or whatever the appropriate email address is in the chat. And if you want to be added to the distribution list for this or other external outreach, please make sure you email the Board of Supervisors or connect with Nick Pasculi so that we can make sure you get notices. And for most decisions that we make, we don't hear from everyone in the community. We hear from, those who are paying attention, and we have to take information, recognizing that, who we're hearing from may be the loudest people in the room, but it's clearly not ever going to be everyone in the room or everyone in the county. So I think we understand that and understand the limitations of the feedback that we have received, understand the limitations of the survey, but really do want to make sure that we are providing as much accountability, as much oversight, and as much transparency as possible. And sometimes when you can't have accountability or you can't have oversight, sometimes transparency is enough to get you a little bit, to keep everyone on the same page. And so wherever we land on that with our colleagues and with our recommendations, I think we're going to be better off, and we're better off having had this conversation in the first place. So just with that, we'll adjourn our ad hoc conversation and go home and put our kids to bed. Thank you.